Hey guys, this is Rob with the next video in the electrical Revit project series. In this video, we are going to create a site plan. We've done floor plans and ceiling plans. We've done a one-line diagram. So now we're going to create a site plan. Let me get this open. And we are still in our Revit. Nope, that's the architectural. Let's go to the electrical. We are in the electrical model. Create new local. Get this open. Override existing. This should be becoming pretty straightforward for you to open up your drawing. So yeah, we're going to create a site plan, and as you'll find when you get into projects, architects are all over the map about, no pun there, but all over the map about how they are doing their site plans. I've had site plans from an architect, if you look at their model, that is entirely what they call detail lines. That means that there are lines that are only visible in that view, similar to what we do with our text. You know, text is only visible in the view you draw it. It's not part of the 3D model. So architects have done that with site plans, and we can't use that. That view is not usable for us. We need it to be in our actual model. So let me show you what I mean here. We're going to create our site plan as a power plan, a floor plan, because it's looking down at the floor or ground of the site, not a ceiling plan. So let me just close some of these things. We can go into our overall floor plan or our first floor power. Let's do overall for now. This is our overall plan, and we don't have any site information modeled here. As you can see, we have a couple things. Outside the building, the only thing that's really modeled by the architect are some bike racks. We have our selection set to everything right now. We can tab to highlight that and click on it and see that it's a bike rack. It's actually, it's on their site category, but it's actually a 3D model of a bike rack. And let's see what else. Yeah, that's all we have is bike racks. There's no other site amenities modeled by this architect, which is fairly common. On their site plan, if they even have a site plan, there's probably just detail lines for curbs and sidewalks and trees and such, which doesn't help us because we need model piece. This here looks like part of a driveway. Let me tab through there. Okay, this is just called lines. Now, like I said, detail lines do not show up in the model. They only show up in a view. But another type of line called a model line is actually added to the model and shows up in all the views. So right here in the architecture tab that I'm on right now, over here in the middle, you can see model line. It says it creates a line that exists in the 3D space and is visible in all views of a project. You can use model lines to represent 3D geometry in a building design, such as cords or cables. To create detail lines that are visible only in a particular view, you use a detail line. So there's two different kinds of lines. These model lines are actually in the model. Same thing with model text. If they wanted to add street names or things like that, that actually show up in the model. So we've only got a few model lines and a few things. So we need to get the rest of the site geometry in here. Well, how do we do that? If you recall, back when we set this electrical project up, we looked at the architectural model and saw that it had some links. We went to the Manage tab, we went to the Manage Links, and this is our model, so it only has one link. But under CAD formats in that architectural model, there were 3 CAD links. One of them was a site plan, if you recall. Now, the best way to deal with this is to go to the architect and ask them to send you that actual site plan DWG. That way, you can also link it into your model and use it. As an aside on that, we've done projects that were a hybrid of CAD and Revit. We've done some schools where the architect did not see a need to model the entire school for the 3 rooms that they were remodeling. So the bulk of the school was actually a CAD link, and only the few rooms remodeled were model, 3D model. So some projects you may find that a heavy use of CAD, and I'll probably do another future video for a project that is 90% CAD, 10% Revit, because that's kind of a special situation. But in this case, in this project, and this was an actual project, there was not enough site information that we even created. We didn't even create an electrical site plan. That was not our scope. The civil and architect were dealing with vaults and such. Because this is an urban setting, a downtown, there's no parking lots, nothing like that on the site for us to deal with. So they dealt with it. So I didn't even create a site plan for this project. But for instructional purposes, I'm going to fake in a site plan on this project to show you the process. So let's assume that we did get the site plan DWG from the architect. I've created one, kind of faked one together that we can use for this video. So how do we deal with that? Well, let's say we got our site plan from the architect. What we want to do is we want to go to the insert. Now, this is how we linked our architectural Revit in to begin with. This time we want to link a CAD. Now there's other buttons here, like over here, there's an import CAD. Well, the import CAD brings CAD into the model permanently. It's kind of like, I guess it's like a block in AutoCAD. Well, we don't want that, because if we change the site plan or get a new site plan from the architect, we want it to change automatically like an XREF. So we want to actually link the CAD. So hit link CAD, and we're in the electrical. So we need to go to we're storing XREFs and still in the XREF. So let's go to the site plan. Now, what do we have here? Now, to prepare for this video, I've already done this, so it's got some settings that aren't default. But normally, a default will say preserve the colors. Well, we don't want colors. Colors don't plot right. So we're going to say black and white. We want all the layers to come in, and the units, feet or inches, we can let that be auto detect. That typically works. If not, you can force it. I just leave this checked, correct lines that are slightly off axis. Positioning. Now there's a number of positionings you can do. Center to center, origin to origin, a separate shared coordinates, manual. I just leave origin to origin at first to see what happens. Sometimes it comes in. And then it's going to, I can pick which level it comes on. Right now I'm on level 1. I want it there. It's oriented to my view. If my view was rotated, it would be rotated. And the big one here, I just unchecked it real quick, but normally the default is unchecked for current view only, which means it would put this CAD link on every single view in my project. Well, I don't want that. I only want this site plan drawing to show up on my site plan view. So I will say current view only. And see what happens. Now, one thing I realized too is I should have created a site plan view first before I did all this, but I can do it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this view. Now I want to duplicate it with detailing. Now with detailing, what does that mean again? That means don't just duplicate with the model, but duplicate with any detailing elements like text or CAD files. A CAD file is a detail element, a two-dimensional detail element. So I'm going to do that. And this way I can right-click, rename, and create my site plan. Let's go with caps. And I hit the wrong key. All right, we want site plan. Now I'm going to call this electrical, not just power, because it could have power and lighting on a site. So there we go, site plan electrical. All right, so I've got as you can see, this came in. Now it has trees, and these look like vaults of some other trees. We've got a few other things come in. We even have, it looks like a bike rack came in on the site plan that does not match the model. So we may have to sync that up with the architect and see what's going on there. For now, I'll leave it. But this way, this minimal site information came in. Usually a site will have, curbs and sidewalks also, but this one's minimal because it didn't truly have a site plan. So there. Now we've got that in here, and it's only in this site plan view. If I was to look at my power plan, you will see that none of that shows up because I said current view only, or that view only. So it's only in the site plan. So other things I want to look at, if you zoom in here, you can see that the site plan looks like it has some building elements as well. It has some walls, and they don't exactly match up with the model. You know how it is. Sometimes you get a site plan that's out of sync with the floor plan. They're not always the same revision, same version. So that may not be an issue because typically on a site plan, we don't want to see the interior model anyway. So we'll find a way to turn that off in this plan and just let the building outline show that's in the site plan. So we'll deal with that too. Well, now that we start dealing with visibility, turning things on and off, we look at our view template and we see that this has a view template applied to it, the power plan view template. Well, our site plan settings are going to be different than our power plan because, again, we're going to want to show lighting and power on the site. We're going to have a different set of visibility, and typically we'll have a different scale. Site plans are typically a different scale than the floor plan. So let's see what we have for templates. Well, in here we don't have a site plan template. We've not created one in our project template. We probably could, and it may be helpful for us to do that. But the main reason to have a template anyway is if you're going to apply it to multiple views, so you don't have to change the view of the settings for each view. For example, on our floor plans, this actually ended up being, I think, a 7-story building. We would have 7 floors, and we want to apply a template to every one of those floors. Well, a site plan, we only have 1. So it's really not necessary to have a template for one view. We'll just set it up how we want and call it good. Now we can create one just for practice, and we may do that. But for now, let's just unlink this view from a template altogether. So let's say none. Okay. Now on our view template, we have no view template. So now we can change the view settings however we like outside of the view template. So now when we want to change things, we don't go to the view template and change it here. We're going to do it up here. And you can see when you click in this, it's not grayed out. We can actually get to all of our categories and things like that. So now what can we do? We want to see how to deal with this CAD file. Now, luckily this came in fairly clean, but a lot of times when you bring in a CAD file, you'll have things you want to turn off. to help better see what's going on in the CAD file, I'm going to turn off the model so I can only see the CAD. How do we turn off the model? Well, you could go to the Manage Links and like unload it, the CAD link. Well, we don't want to do that because that would disconnect all of our hosted elements. We don't want to do that. What we do is we go into the visibility graphics, and this is where we can, remember, we can deal with models and annotations. Imports are where the CAD came in. Links is where the architectural Revit link is in. So there's a number of places that these can be. The Revit link itself is here. And this is just for the visibility of it. It doesn't, if I unclick the visibility of this architectural link, I'm not unlinking it. I'm not removing it. I'm just turning it off so I can't see it. So just for now, just turn that off and say, okay. And now my architectural model disappears in this view. Only in this view. So that lets me see what's in CAD. Well, I can also see my electrical items here. We'll deal with that in a minute. But for now, I can see what's in my CAD. And so in my CAD, I've got doors and walls. And this is going to be okay for us in this instance. But sometimes you'll want to turn things off. Just for practice, let's see if I want to turn the doors off in this CAD. Well, how do I do that? First of all, can I even click on? I have things selected here. Okay, I'm good there. Can I click? If I click there, I happen to click. What am I clicking? I'm looking at the site plan DWG. I've actually clicked on the imported CAD file. Another way to notice that is up here. I'll get some tools. Bring to the front, send to back. It kind of sounds like CAD language. Delete the layer. Now query. Query determines the identity of an imported object and the layer on which it resides. This can be used to turn layers on and off of our CAD. So I click on query. Now I can hover over and see things light up. If I hover over that, click it, it tells me it's an arc. It's part of a block. It's on layer A door. I can layer or level. I can hide in this view this A door layer. Hide in view. That's how I can turn layers on and off in my CAD. Now, if this was CAD, if I still had a view template attached to this, I couldn't do this. I'd have to go into the view template and mess with it. But when it's unlinked, I can do this by picking. What's this? This is a floor. I can hide that in view. So I can go through and individually turn things on and off. I need to go back to query. What is this vault on? It's on A detail. So I don't want to get rid of A detail. What's this in? That's L site. Now I can turn that off, and that way when I turn my model back on, it'll only have the model bike racks. So you can isolate things fairly well in CAD. Again, just like when we used CAD for a full project, it depends on how well the architect did on the layering. For example, I can't turn the trees off independently. Whoops. Click back on there. I can't turn the trees independently because they're in the same layer A detail as my vault. That's okay. I'll leave those on. And I'll leave the, I'm going to turn the doors back on. Well, how do I turn those back on? I can't find them. Well, this is where, again, we go to visibility. We find our CAD link. It's not a Revit link. It is an import. If I click on the site plan, expand it out, now I can see all the layers listed here as well. So I can get to a door this way. Say, okay, turn it back on. So all I did was I turned off some interior walls. The rest of this is going to be fine for my purposes. One thing I noticed too is that these are fairly heavy lines. And we typically like our backgrounds to be screened or half-toned. So how can we do that? Let's go look at our, and you'll be into this visibility a lot. Let's go look into visibility. These are our categories. We can halftone those, but we want to halftone the CAD. So import, here's our site plan. Here, halftone. We can halftone CAD right here. Now it goes gray. So we've got that done. Another thing I notice here is this site plan came in with its own grids. Here's our grids. Here's the site plan grids. So click on that CAD. Now sometimes you won't be able to click right on the CAD. You'll be clicking on your architectural model sometimes. If you have that problem, remember that the tab key drills down through the various items. Anyway, so we have our CAD. Let's query this. What's that? It's a S-grid identification. Hide that. We still have the grid line. S-grid, hide that. There we go. Now we've turned off their grid. We only have our grid showing. And we can fix our grids like we always have to in each view. We will fix them here in our site plan view. Okay. So there. Now, after we've gone through all the layers, turn them on and off, now how do I deal with turning off all of this internal electrical stuff? I don't need this showing on my site plan. Well, I could go into visibility categories. I could go through here and turn off electrical equipment, turn off fixtures, turn off lights, turn off everything, and it won't show. That would work. However, a lot of times on a site plan, we need to show connections. We need to show lights. For example, let's say this tree. If we wanted to put a receptacle in the tree well for holiday lights, or let's say in one of these vaults, we needed a sump pump and we need to put power. If we were to add a receptacle out here and then turn off all the electrical fixtures, it would turn off our receptacle. So we don't have a fine enough scheme to turn things on and off site or building out of the box. This is where work sets come into play. And this is one good use for a work set. A work set is, you can think of it kind of like layers, but it's another category of isolating objects. So out of the default, we just have two work sets. So if I click on this little work set button, you can also get up to it in collaborate work sets over here. Same button. Click on work sets and it shows you your work sets. Now, the two default work sets are shared levels and grids, which is, like it says, it has the levels and grids on it. And the other work set is called work set 1, just a generic name. And everything else besides levels and grids is in work set 1. The architectural model, all of our receptacles, all of our lights, everything is in work set 1. We can add additional work sets to further separate our work. Now, some places I've worked with get crazy with work sets. I've seen 50, 100 work sets for every different piece, conduits on a separate work set and things like that. We don't need that level of detail for our typical work. In fact, as you add more work sets, it means you have to keep in mind which work set you're putting your items on, and it's a lot of work. So we only need to add the minimal work sets we need to do our job. What I've found for site plans is I like to add a site work set so that anything on the site is on that work set and can be turned off in every other view and only show up on the site plan. Furthermore, on that site plan, I can turn off this work set 1, which is all the interior, so I can isolate it. So this is how we do it. All we do, and just about work sets, you see this editable thing. That just means that I can't edit like the properties of this work set. It doesn't mean I can't edit what's on the work set. I can most certainly edit what's on the work set, but I just can't edit its properties. So don't let that non-editable bother you. Over here, the default setting, these are default settings. We're going to say these are visible in all views. But we're going to create a new work set. We're going to call it Site. Now, before I click OK, this is very important. Think about what views you want this work set to be visible in by default. You can always change it on each individually, but by default, I do not want this visible in all my views. I don't need the site plan visible on power plans or lighting plans, or I only need it visible on the site. So I'm going to say the default is not visible in all the views. So it's not visible. Okay. Now, do I want to make the site work set the active work set, the one I'm currently working on? Let's go ahead and say yes, because I'm going to be drawing some things or adding some things in that work set. So this tells you now what your active work set is down at the bottom here. We're actively working on the site. If I were to start adding devices inside the building, they would be on the site work set, and it wouldn't even show. In fact, right now, if I try to draw something on with this site work set, let's say I want to put a receptacle outside or out here somewhere, it wouldn't even show up because I need to turn on the site work set in this view. How do I do that? Back to visibility graphics. Up here in your tabs where you have your CAD and you have your Revit links, there's also one called work sets. So here's our work sets, our site we added. You can see our site says, for this view, site plan view, use the global settings of not visible. So the default global setting is not visible. Well, I need to make it visible in this one view. So show it. Okay. So now anything I draw on site will actually show up. Let's go ahead and add a receptacle out here in this tree well. I can just find one and say create similar. So let's take a standard and say create similar, and let's go put it out here. Now, why can't I place it out here? Well, I can't place it out here because there's nothing to host my receptacle. If you remember, receptacles are hosted to a wall. I don't have any walls or objects out here. Now, what's funny is you can host it to a grid line, which I find kind of strange. But I can't host it to just a line. I can host it to the building. So, how do you get around that when you have nothing to host your receptacle to? Well, I create a host. I'll go up to the Architecture tab, and I'll hit the wall, and then I'll go over here and find a thinner wall. 8-inch was default. Let's go to 5-inch. And I will draw a wall somewhere to mount a receptacle. Let's say if there's like a tree well here. I'm going to put a short little wall, let's say just like that. And now I can take my receptacle, create similar, drag it over, and it finds the wall. So that's a way to cheat a wall into the system to let you mount receptacles. You may find that sometimes even inside when you want to put a receptacle on an island that's just lines, you can build a wall. So I do that, and of course I may add notes. Let's go to the text. I might put something like weatherproof GFI as a text note. So there's some site information. I don't have much on this site plan. That's why we didn't have one, but let's say we have that. So that's great, but how do we get rid of this stuff now? Well, now that we have our separate work sets, we can turn off the categories for this work set 1. And we just will actually turn off the entire work set 1. Now, we already turned off our model in this. But if we didn't turn off the model, let's put the model back on. Remember we turned it off in this view? Put the model back on. The model happens to be on workset 1. So now if we actually turn off the workset 1, right now in this view, it's visible. So let's change it from its global visible to hide it. Okay. Now the architectural model is gone, and all of our electrical model is turned off as well. It's just turned off. It's not gone, but it's not visible. So this lets us have a view for a site plan that doesn't show all the interior. Now, one thing we also might want to do on a site plan is show, this happens to be the electrical vault, and we can annotate this with a note for now. This is SD or DD level. So we'll say provide secondary vault. And we'll add more to that as time goes on. But for now, we've got a secondary vault. We may want to show conduits coming from the secondary vault into our MDP, which we can't see. So we can turn that MDP back on. And it's good to practice with turning things on and off. I mean, that's half the battle here is knowing how to deal with visibility issues. So it's good to practice this. I mean, every time I jump in here, it's kind of like relearning and practicing as well, because there's so many places to change things. But in this case, I want to see my interior stuff, which I turned off by workset. So let's put this back on. And I said show, or I can go to global. The default global is also show. Turn that back on. Here's our MDP. Now my MDP is a piece of electrical equipment on workset 1. How am I going to get this to show on the site plan? Well, I can move this to the site plan workset, but then it won't show on my normal interior. So what I would do on the site plan is I will just draw it in as a detail line. Detail lines only show up in the view. I will just use the rectangle tool to just draw right on top of that MDP. So I drew that in. Now when I go back to my workset and turn off workset 1, okay, I still have a rectangle that I can call the MDP. MDP. Get a leader on there. So now I have the MDP shown, and now I can show conduits. Now, in future videos, we'll learn how to model conduits in 3D, which can be helpful for large feeders, for coordination with other utilities and HVAC ductwork and things like that. But for DD right now, for site plan DD use, I'm just going to draw it in as a line, as lines, just to get the point across. So I can go up to my annotate, which I'm in, my detail lines for this view only, and I'm going to use a different line type. Medium lines, we have one here called super heavy dash. Let's try that. I'm going to come from this vault over to here, but I'm going to bring it in. Let's say that I've got some preliminary info from the utility that shows they want to do 45s or some kind of an angle. We can play with that later, but for now, let's just get this like that. Now that, we can add a note, secondary conduits, use our text, underground secondary. And once I do a note, I can tweak the size of the box. Let's change this from aerial arrow to aerial loop, and then get a leader on that, which is a loop. And it's going to be hard to see with that thick line type, but something like that. Again, for DD purposes, that works. And now we have a site plan, just like that. It's minimal on this project, but there we go. So we know how to bring in CAD. We know how to turn layers on and off. We unlinked it from the view template. We can turn grids on and off. One more thing is our grids are way out here. And so if we drag this onto a sheet, it's just going to be huge. It may even be bigger than the sheet. How do we rein in and crop these? We can move them in, but then the elevations will show, things like that. We need to apply a scope box like we did for the building. We need to apply that to the site. So as we recall, that's under View. Go to the View tab. Over here is Scope Box. Click on that, and let's draw a box that is outside of our site info. So something like this. We can always modify it. And come down to include our trees and just get it tied in there to the site. And we will call this scope box site. Site, enter, apply. So now we've created this, escape out. Now we want to actually use it. So now we go down to scope box for this view and select our site, not building. Apply. It crops it in, gets our detail or grid bubbles where we want them. So now we have a site plan. Now sometimes on any of these plans, we may want to add our old hex notes. And in the next video, when I show you how to create sheets for actual printing, I will show you how we can create some hex notes for our plans. But right now, we really have all of the plans, or views I should say, that we need to create our DD set. And so the next video we will show you how to get stuff added to sheets and get the title block set up, things like that. So that's all for now. Until next time.